My next guest is a man for Americans. He's someone that can tell you about the Ninth Amendment to the Constitution, as well as judicial activism and what we can and should do about it. Welcome to another episode of Conversations. This is the show where we talk about the issues that matter to you and me. Today's guest is David Fowler. David served on the Tennessee legislature in the Senate for 12 years, and he's also the president of Family Action of Tennessee. And David is an author. His book, and I'm going to read the title, is The Politics of Loving God, Courageous Truths for Contentious Times. David, welcome to
It's great to be back with you again. It's been a long time since we've been on the show, and actually, even though we live in the same community, I don't see you as often as I like, but thank you for the chance to be here.
Well, you've been so busy. Every time I see you, you have a new cause, and I understand that you're very concerned about what's happening with judges and their overreach during elections.
Yeah. Actually, Carol, there's a huge war taking place over what people would call judicial activism, you know, the concept that judges make law. And it's getting worse. And the legislative branch, which our founders intended to be the most powerful branch of government because it actually represented the people so that the people could live under the laws that they in essence had made through this representative process. Those laws are now being made by judges as if the power of the judicial branch extends over all the people of the state or of the nation. And that's not what our founders understood. It's not what Alexander Hamilton said in the Federalist Papers, where people were concerned that the judiciary would become the strongest branch, which it now effectively is. He said, wait a minute, you have to understand that the judges cannot be the strongest branch because the judicial power exists only to resolve a dispute between particular people. It doesn't have jurisdiction over everybody. In other words, it can't speak to the whole people. It can only speak to the people in the courtroom. And the legislature can speak to everybody.
Well, let me say this, David. Yeah. My concern has to do, if I look at the U.S. Congress in particular, under Nancy Pelosi, I'm concerned about the legislative branch when you have partisanship about their overreach. And so, as far as the Constitution, it seems to me that there's a huge imbalance with the executive branch and executive orders that overstep the legislature, and then sometimes with legislative acts that may actually be unconstitutional.
Sure.
They seem to, it varies. But I know what you're talking about, and I'm very concerned as well.
Well, I think you've hit on what I see as two problems here. One is that we have judges that are going beyond granting relief to the people in front of them. So let's say that you sue the state or the national government, and the court says you're entitled to relief. But then they say, but we're going to actually extend that relief to everybody in the nation or everybody in the state. Well, those people aren't in front of the judges.
That's right.
They did not have a voice in that courtroom to say, well, I actually don't like that. And in fact, a different judge in a different part of the country or the state may come to a different conclusion. So this is crazy, but what you're also driving at with Congress is that we've lost the concept of dual sovereigns, that the national government has only a delegated, limited authority that's supposed to pertain only to matters of national importance, leaving to the states to regulate the domestic areas, the normal day-to-day affairs of the people within their borders. And that's why I've written a book on the Ninth Amendment, because my attempt here through the Ninth Amendment, the Forgotten Amendment I would call it,
right, I agree,
is to say, no, most of government of our day-to-day lives was left to the people and their states, not the national government. So we have two competing problems here. Judges that are way off the ranch and a Congress that's way off the ranch trying to run the day-to-day affairs within a state, and they're both problematic, and we're losing our form of government.
And could you tell our viewers what the Ninth Amendment actually says? I know that you, well, just paraphrase.
Yeah, no, I can. Actually, I thought you were going to say, what is the Ninth Amendment? I was going to say it's the one before the 10th.
Right, right.
Because that's about all
but
people
know. But I mean, the 10th
know.
Amendment is about states' rights.
That's right. It's saying that, in essence, that the powers not given to the federal government, which are supposed to be limited, are reserved to the people, meaning we can vote in our federal elections, we can have constitutional amendments to the U.S. Constitution, or to the states, which is what our representatives locally do. But the Ninth Amendment precedes it, and what it says is, the enumeration of specific rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage other rights that have been retained by the people or are retained by the people. And that constitutional amendment, believe it or not, has never been used to support legislation, never been adjudicated or interpreted by the United States Supreme Court. It's truly the forgotten amendment. In fact, when Justice Barrett was in front of the confirmation hearing, somebody said, "What do you think of the Ninth Amendment?" And she said, "Well, we've never been called on to interpret it."
Well,
so it's time to use it, and most people don't know what it is, and that's the purpose of my most recent book, is about the Ninth Amendment.
But do you have any confidence in the Supreme Court that they would actually grapple with the Constitution? Because my sense of it is that they are avoiding conflicts, with state and the federal Constitution.
Sure. Yeah, the thing that, maybe what you're alluding to is the Supreme Court refused to hear some of these election cases about judges in states rewriting state laws.
Not just judges, but people like attorney generals and and governors that overstepped the power of the legislature, and they violated their own state constitutions. The Supreme Court, really avoided dealing with those issues.
Right. No, they have. But here's something that I've begun to realize, particularly in the context of abortion cases, is that if you go to the Supreme Court, or you want to go to the Supreme Court, you need to narrow the issue that you present so that, in essence, they're not given any option but to address the point you want to make.
So you're saying these cases had too many different
Well, sometimes they
claims.
do. So let me bring up a decision that your pro-life constituency may appreciate. Last June, there was a decision by the United States Supreme Court called June Medical Services versus the state of Louisiana. And what happened in that case is the Supreme Court struck down a law in Louisiana that said doctors had to have admitting privileges and the clinics had to have certain regulations for the health and safety of the women. They ruled it unconstitutional. It was actually a 4-4 decision, with Justice Roberts providing the deciding vote to hold the law unconstitutional. And what he said was critical. He said neither the state nor the plaintiffs, Planned Parenthood, have challenged the idea that Roe and Casey are the controlling precedents. Therefore, we're not going to reverse them. You see, so I tell people, if my wife and I dated for 5 years, if she had, and there were reasons for that, but if she had kept saying, "David, do you love me? Do you like me? Do you want to spend the rest of your life with me?" I could have said, yeah. And finally, she might have said, "Well, are you going to marry me?" You see, now all of a sudden, I got to answer that question. So if you don't go to the Supreme Court with a narrow question, then they will find any way they can to avoid it. And that's where we're messing up, in my opinion.
Well, David, I know that you have done quite a bit of work, with the Ninth Amendment.
Right.
And when we come back from our break, I'd like for you to talk about your second book and why you wrote that book.
Absolutely.
We'll be right back.
Conversations with Dr. Carol Swain is made possible by Cooper Steel, a family-owned business that provides the steel fabrications for some of the greatest buildings across the United States. 60 years ago, Kenneth and Faye Cooper founded their company in Shelbyville, Tennessee.
Cooper Steel believes in sponsoring Carol Swain because we believe as she does, you build strong, you stand strong.
What started as a vision and now a nationally recognized and operated company that remains true to its founders' Judeo-Christian values and principles, Cooper Steel is committed to excellence, responsibility, and community. Cooper Steel's motto is, "Build strong, stand strong." They treat their employees and customers like family. Thank you to Cooper Steel for standing strong with Conversations with Dr. Carol Swain. Learn more about our generous sponsor at coopersteel.com.
I'm back with my guest, David Fowler. David, you published a book, what was it, last year, a couple of years ago?
It was
about
last year.
Okay, the Ninth Amendment. What was the title of that book, and would you tell our viewers
Sure.
a little bit about it?
Sure. The main title is The Ninth Amendment, so you can find it. But it was how to address the pretensions of the United States Supreme Court to power. And really talking about the fact that the Supreme Court has a pretentious view that it has power essentially over everything. And it doesn't. It's supposed to be the weakest branch of government. And so the question that I've been looking at is, how do we challenge it? How do we find a way to challenge the power of the Supreme Court? As we were talking before the break, you have to challenge the notion that the court can do anything it wants and just make up stuff, but you also have to challenge the idea that we have different sovereigns, different branches of government with different functions. And actually the founders understood that structural creation of dual sovereigns and dispersal of powers as itself a preservation of liberty. And that's been lost, that there's a structural liberty, that when those structures are abandoned, there's an aspect of liberty that's lost. Everything becomes nationalized, and it all runs right through the Supreme Court, and we're unrepresented.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think the Supreme Court has set a bad example for lower courts? Because if you think about when President Trump was elected in 2016, well, when he started to actually try to enact, well, mostly through executive orders,
Right.
you saw judge after judge issue injunctions,
Right.
stopping him from doing
Statewide.
things.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean nationwide, yeah. I mean, that's the problem, is a district court judge is over a district.
Right.
And yet they think their rulings can apply across the whole nation.
But I mean, who allows their rulings to apply across the whole nation? And then I have a second question. How come we're not seeing conservative judges challenge President Biden? Because his executive orders, many people would argue, some of them are unconstitutional.
Well, some of those will filter their way up to the court.
But with President Trump, it happened immediately. He would do something the next day, there'd be an injunction.
Sure. Well, there are lots of technical reasons. Conservatives tend to not let cases go to court, and they're very strict about who can bring actions. Liberals tend to let anybody bring an action if they like it. So our own conservative principles keep us from hearing cases that liberals are delighted to hear. So we play with two sets of rules.
Is it because the conservative judges don't want to be overruled? Because a lot of the other judges were overruled after a while.
I really don't know what's going on in some of their heads. I mean,
They're too cautious in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, I had a judge in a case that I was handling 2 years ago, and he said to me specifically, he said, "I think the Court of Appeals in another part of the state is wrong." And I said, "Well, good, you don't have to follow the court over here." And he said, "Look, I understand, but I'm just a lowly trial judge, and I'm not going to say that the Court of Appeals was wrong, even though he was free to do so." Why? Because he knows that other judges are going to say, "You're the guy that called us wrong. We'll see what we do to you next time." I mean, that's the kind of thing that's going on.
So it's fear.
Yeah, a lot of it's fear. But the point is, here's the key point of the Ninth Amendment. Let me go back to that.
Yes.
It says that we have other rights.
Right.
So the first question you have to ask is, well, what are they? Where are they? Where do I go find them? Are they in the closet? Are they in the kitchen shelves? I mean, where do you find them? And the answer that our founders would have said is that they're found in the common law, the law that developed apart from judges and statutes, that says there's natural law, there's revealed laws, and they become our customs. So marriage is between a man and a woman. woman. That's why we didn't have statutes saying marriage is a man and a woman. Everybody just knew it was. You didn't have to say that, okay? So there's certain things that just were given realities in the nature of things.
Everything's changed now.
Oh, it has. But the Ninth Amendment, see, is
Right.
our guarantee to say there is a concept of law by which we have rights that don't come from the Constitution.
But do you have any sincere hopes that the Supreme Court would actually look at the Ninth Amendment, or that judges would begin to take it seriously?
Well, that's where I go back to saying you're going to have to ground a bill specifically in it to say this is what I'm relying on so that the court can't ignore it. And that's what I've been working on in Alabama. I'm trying to work on with abortion laws in Kentucky and Mississippi and Alabama and Arkansas and in Tennessee, is to say the legislature is enacting this bill because of the Ninth Amendment and because there are rights that the people have prior to the Constitution that they didn't give up, and when you construe an enumerated right to deny or disparage this concept of rights, you have violated the United States Constitution.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think the Constitution itself will withstand the time period we're in? Because I know when I was in college and as a professor, we talked about the Constitution as a living document. It changes with the people and times. And so there are people that disparage the Constitution because it was written by wealthy white men.
Right.
That is a viewpoint that if that were to be the, you know, that if that were to dominate, why would justices who are, quote, progressive have any respect for the Constitution? It doesn't matter what they wrote, you know.
Yeah, and I don't think they
centuries
do. I think a lot of them don't have any respect for the Constitution, really. Not as it was written.
Right.
And they rewrite it. And that's where, you know, the title of your book, Be the People. We have to be the people to insist that our legislators say some of these judges need to be removed. Some of them need to not be affirmed. We need to take back our government from those who are trying to undermine it and rewrite it without our consent. And the question is, how do we begin to do that? And what I believe is that the Ninth Amendment is potentially a tool by which we can assert that, see, the people reserved rights to themselves. The 10th Amendment says, and we have the power to protect them. And those two things need to go together.
Well,
and so that's what I'm pushing on. That'll be my life's ambition for the next however long I've got left to live.
I certainly believe that the we the people in the preamble have to stand up and be the people.
It's time. Yeah.
All right.
That's a good title for a book. You should.
All right. We'll be right back.
Dr. Carol Swain's Be the People, a call to reclaim America's faith and promise, newly released in paperback and audio with a new introduction, is a challenge to all Americans. If you are serious about being the best citizen you can be, this is the book for you. From addressing moral relativism to reclaiming the future, you'll understand why Dr. Swain is one of the most relevant voices in today's culture war. Are you ready to reclaim America's faith and promise? Purchase at bethepeoplenews.com/books or wherever books are sold.
The Biden administration's executive order on immigration brings to the forefront one of the most volatile issues of our time. In this timely second edition of Debating Immigration, I join my voice to that of other experts to provide you with facts and information that will help you understand what is at stake for our nation. This edition offers 21 original essays that cover race, religion, economics, human smuggling, and civil rights.
Purchase at bethepeoplenews.com/books or wherever books are sold.
I'm back with my guest, David Fowler. David, what advice would you give the viewers when it comes to how can they be most effective in being the people who exert enough pressure on the legislature or even the judicial system to be able to make a difference that they can see?
Well, one of the things that I have found in my own experience is that a lot of people in general don't really understand our Constitution and how it's supposed to work. And and that's unfortunate because if you don't know how it's supposed to work, you can't insist that it work right and correctly. So I had a person ask me the other day, intelligent person, in his 60s, successful business person, and said, why don't with this, new election law that they're working on and all that, why didn't some court just save us the time and declare it unconstitutional? And it's kind of like, well, because somebody has to actually bring a lawsuit. The court just can't rove around and say, oh, that law, that's unconstitutional. So there's a citizen who just doesn't even understand how the judicial power works.
Well, let me ask you this.
And so we need to get educated, but then we need to get engaged.
But when you look at what happened after the 2020 election,
Right.
there were all these citizens that swore on affidavits, and they were
Right.
doing this, trying to get legal action, but nothing happened.
Well, and again, as we've talked, we've got a problem with the judicial branch. But that's where we need to understand when the judicial branch is acting out of place. When our legislature has a chance to check the judicial branch, we need to make sure they do. So, for instance, in Tennessee, we have a little situation right now where the legislature is looking at removing a chancellor who rewrote our ballot laws. And there was surreptitious taking place activities in the committee where they didn't allow both sides to present testimony, and they killed it. And
Really?
so, yeah. So what I've been doing is I've been putting the word out here.
Can that be challenged in any kind of way, or
Well,
can they do what they want?
Well, the reality is the legislature can reconsider their action, and we're urging them to do so.
Well, most people don't know
Yeah,
what took place.
and so that's what I've been doing. I've been sending out videos and messages saying, call the Speaker of the House, tell the Speaker, we want this resolution reconsidered.
Well, have you done a press conference?
Not yet.
Well, maybe we should do a press conference.
Well, we can do one, but it needs to happen. But see, what happened, this is an example. So for your out-of-state listeners, let me give you an example. A constituent reached out to me and said, well, I understand the sponsor of the resolution could have asked for the bill to be moved over so his experts could be present, and he didn't do so. And I said, that's actually not true. At the very beginning of the hearing, he said, my expert witness can't be available today, so could we move this discussion of the bill for 2 weeks? And so he did. So somebody in the legislature, presumably, was lying to this constituent.
Well, I mean, that happens all the time.
Well, it happens all the
That's
time.
not-
But ultimately, what we need to do is we need to get educated, and then we need to elect some people of integrity who will not lie to their constituents. And then we need to have people like me that are out here saying that's a lie. It's not true.
Well, while we're on Tennessee, we have an appointed Attorney General.
Right.
What do you think, what are the chances of us being able to give the people of Tennessee more control over the selection of the Attorney General?
Yeah, actually, Tennessee is the only state in the nation where the Supreme Court, before whom the Attorney General will be arguing cases, is appointed by the Supreme Court.
So, I mean, are we going to be able to change that?
Well, a resolution did pass through the Senate. It'll now have to pass through the House to go on the ballot because that's a constitutional requirement. It's not a statute. So we have to change the Constitution. And what it would say is the Supreme Court can nominate somebody, but the legislature would have to confirm it. So it'd be a lot like...
But why not just take it and give it to the people?
The legislature's not going to vote for that.
Why? I'm sorry.
Well, I think the answer is you need to have a competent lawyer, which is true, and you don't want just somebody who's got a lawyer who's got $2 million to go out here and spend in an election and get himself elected who really doesn't know anything.
But other states seem to do pretty well with their attorney generals. If you don't look at Michigan, and we can take a few states off.
Sure, but Tennessee just won't do that. It's so ingrained. I mean, I've been working on this for years as well, and this is probably as close as we'll get, is to say at least the legislature can say, no, thank you, we're not going to appoint this person, we're not going to confirm this appointment. And at least what that does do is it allows me to go to candidate Swain and say, all right, what kind of attorney general are you going to appoint? And what if the guy's former general counsel for the ACLU? Are you going to confirm him? At least I have an indirect say. And right now we have no say because we don't even vote for the Supreme Court justices either. So the Supreme Court appoints Attorney General, and we don't get to vote on anything.
Okay, well, could you sort of sum up your advice to the viewers about how they can hold their legislatures accountable or to bring some balance
Sure.
when it comes to judicial activism?
Well, I think one thing they need to do is, one, get educated. Two, if they're not overly educated, find an organization that they trust, that shares their values, that says, I want you to tell me what's important that's going on because I trust you and I know your values. And then when they call you to action, you need to ask. You need to make the phone call. You need to send the email. You need to show up at the committee hearing. You need to go to the town halls that the legislators host. You need to be engaged. You need to be the people, because in our form of government, the authority of the government rests first in the people.
It should, and was supposed to.
And we need to take it back.
And when you tell people to get educated, like
Yeah.
if someone's listening and they hear you say get educated, what would be the first step you would advise them to take?
Well, you know, there are a lot of great organizations. One, they can read your book. I'm going to do a book on the Ninth Amendment that's written more towards lay people. The one we've talked about is really written for lawyers, and
Right.
people will read it and go to sleep at night.
Right.
So
I'm sorry, I don't mean to say right. But
yeah, but no, it really
we do
is.
need to write for the people.
Yeah, that's right. That's
Yeah.
right. So I was trying to write to the lawyers first, and now I'm going to write a more simplified
That
version.
sounds great.
But they need to find podcasts where people talk about these things, and you know, and there are a lot
Yes.
of good ones, but many of them are trying to entertain, not just educate.
But
So
sometimes, you know, you can educate and entertain at the same time.
well, you can. That's right. That's right.
And that is some good advice. And there's some organizations,
Sure.
you know, that are set up to help people understand the Constitution.
Sure.
Hillsdale College
That's
has
right.
a
I
course
was
on
going
the
to say
Constitution.
they have a course, and that would be a great one.
Right. David, thank you so much for
It's a
being a
delight.
guest on Conversations. I'd love to have you back at some point.
Let's do it.
And I would love to be involved in some of the activities that you're doing in Tennessee, because it is my adopted home state,
right.
and I would like to see us be a model for the rest of the nation in a positive sense.
Amen. Amen. I'm with you.
I'll be right back after a word from my sponsors.
For those of you who would like to know what exactly our children are facing in their education system, this is a must-read book. It will equip you and prepare you to make decisions about your child's health, about your child's education. So I want to encourage every one of you to grab a copy of Dr. Swain's book and join with me and Carol on the front lines in this critical time to eradicate the liberal abduction of our children.
I'd like to thank my guest, David Fowler, for joining us today, and you for tuning in. Join us again next week for another episode of Conversations.